How long do you need? Waiting for Akram, 1 second. Good morning, everyone. We will start in exactly 1 minute. We're just waiting for a technical thing to be solved. Okay, good morning again. The technical glitch has been sorted out. Welcome everyone to this new gTLD workshop. My name is Shireen Shalabi. I'm a member of the board. And over the last few years, I was also the chair of the new gTLD program committee that had oversight responsibility on the last round of expansion of namespaces. So what I'd like to do is start with just restating the purpose of this session, then ask members of the panels who are really representing various stakeholders to present themselves. Then I'll give a brief introduction to the agenda, and we'll get going. We have about an hour and a half. The first part of the discussion will be just presentation, so to bring everybody up to date. And the second part of the discussion will be open to questions and answers, and anybody please engage in a vigorous way in terms of debate and expressing your views. So what is the purpose of this session? Frankly, it's really to bring everybody up to date with what's happened since we launched that last round. And as you know, there's been various reviews taking place on the impact of the last round on things like consumer choice and consumer trust. And at the same time, part of the ICANN stakeholders, the GNSO, is looking at the PDP and there should be any policy changes or any implementation changes to the next round. So we want to bring you up to date with these two things and then launch it into a vigorous discussion so that you know what's going on prior to any launch of another round of new gTLDs. So with that in mind, I would like now to ask members of the panels who are sitting around this table, please to introduce themselves. Then I will give you a bit more briefing on the agenda, and then we'll kick off very quickly. So I will start with, on my left, so Akram.
Hi, Akram Atala. I'm responsible for the new gTLD program within the Global Domains Division. And we implement basically all the policies and the recommendations that the board asks us to implement from the community. Thank you.
Thanks, Akram. Jonathan Zook. I'm from ACT, the App Association, but for purposes of this discussion, I'm also chair of the review of the new gTLD program that's focused in on consumer choice, competition, and consumer trust. So we'll be talking a little bit about our work there.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Megan Richards from the European Commission. I'm here, I think, because I'm a member of the Competition, Consumer Choice, and anyway, the same one as Jonathan is leading very capably. Thanks.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Olivier Crépin-Leblanc. I'm the chair of the European At-Large organization. At-Large is the part of ICANN. We've heard of it, At-Large Advisory Committee, the ALAC, part of ICANN that brings the input of end users into the ICANN processes. And I track the gTLD Marketplace Health Index, which we'll talk about in a moment.
Who's next?
I'm Patrick Pennings. I'm the head of the Information Society Department of the Council of Europe. And I brought with me a study on the applications to ICANN for community-based new generic top-level domain names, opportunities, challenges from a human rights perspective, which I can share with you.
My name is Andrew Mack. I run a firm called AM Global based in Washington, and our firm did a study of the new gTLD program, specifically why it did and didn't pick up in global South markets around the world that we presented in Hyderabad. Happy to answer any questions about that.
Thank you. I really appreciate the introduction, but I think I'd like the panelists who are going to give some presentation to introduce themselves at this stage. Yeah? All right. So where are we going after? Renalia?
Thank you, Shireen. I'm Renalia Abdurrahim. I'm a member of the ICANN board. I'm a member of the board IDN working group, and I'll be talking about IDNs.
Thank you. Olga?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Olga Cavalli. I think that I can add value in this panel in my role of GAC Vice Chair and representative of Argentina and Chair of the GAC Working Group on Protection of Geographic Names in new gTLDs.
Hi, I'm Avri Doria. I'm a member of the non-commercial stakeholder group, but I'm here as co-chair of the Policy Development Process Working Group on new gTLD subsequent procedures.
Thank you. And Nigel, do you want to introduce yourself, or everybody knows?
I'm Nigel Hickson, ICANN staff. I'm the sort of coordinator. Thank you.
Thank you very much. A small administrative matter to start with. Unfortunately, there's no translation for this session, so everything has to be in English, unfortunately. And for remote participants, they will submit their questions, I'm told, in writing, and it will appear on the screen there on the left-hand side, but Nigel will read it so that everybody can hear what the question is. So let me just lay out the agenda for you. We will start with Akram, who's sitting here on my left, who's going to give us an overview of all of the various reviews that are taking place on the last round of the new gTLD expansion, as well as on the PDP process. After Akram's brief overview, we'll hand over to Jonathan, who is here, who introduced himself earlier, to give us a status and progress on the CCTRT review, the Consumer Trust and Consumer Choice review that's taking place. Following that, I'll hand over to Olivier Crépin-Leblanc, who's going to talk about the Marketplace Health Index. After that, I'll hand over to Avri, who's sitting here on my right, to talk about the PDP background and status. And then various panelists who represent stakeholders will just give their views on those two things we would have just talked about, the various reviews as well as the PDP. And we will ask Olivier to give a couple of minutes, Megan a couple of minutes, and Olga a couple of minutes. And then we have some topics of interest which we'd like to bring you up to date. One is the IDNs, and Renalia, who's a board member here, will give that. Then the two-letter CC, which has been a lot of discussion about recently. Akram and Cyrus, if he's here, will give us a couple of minutes introduction. And also the last topic will be geographical imbalance. So all of that should take roughly between around 40 minutes. And that leaves another 50 minutes for questions and answers, which I will moderate. And at the end, we will finish with a 5-minute summary of all of the points or any conclusion or any decision or any action we need to take, which Nigel will summarize to us the outcome of this discussion. So enough with the introduction. Let's go immediately to Akram to give us an overview of the various reviews and the PDPs that are taking place. Akram? I will keep a tight watch on every presentation so that we move along, if you don't mind.
We go to the next one. So, well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for attending the session. What I will do is I'll give a quick overview of the current round and where we are with that so that everybody understands why everybody's talking about the next one, so which I think is important. Then we'll talk a little bit about what's on the calendar and what's going on in prep for the next round. And the details and the details of some of the reviews that are going on, and then I'll move on. I'll move it to on the CCT review to Zach to take from there. Next slide. So if you look at the current round, you can see that basically we're at the tail end of the current round. We are left with we've had about 1,249 total strings that can be delegated, and out of these 1,249, we've already contracted 1,229. So there are only 20 remaining strings that can be contracted to deal with. Now, the numbers that you see on the right of these bars sometimes are bigger than others, but it's because there are in contention, for example, multiple applications for the same string, but only one can be delegated. So this is how some of the numbers shake out. So when you look at that, you'll see that we're left with only 20 to go. There are a few that need to be withdrawn that haven't withdrawn. There are a few that have applied for strings like home, corp, and mail that were found to be to have. There's 20 of them, I think, that applied for home, corp, and mail that haven't withdrawn. Where the study that we did on collisions found that these three strings are they have a lot of collisions, and therefore the board has issued a resolution not to delegate. So we need to deal with those lagging applications that haven't withdrawn or haven't contracted to finish the round. Moving on to the next slide. The current program reviews and the policies that are going on, you can see that a lot of work has been done already between the last few years, and there is some work still going on in the competition trust and choice review. The Trademark Clearinghouse is also work that's ongoing. It's going to close shortly. The route stability review also, we expect that to close in next year. So a lot of these reviews will be hopefully done within the 2017 time frame. And then the orange bars that you see there are ongoing policy development that are either important for the new gTLD program or relevant to the new gTLD program. So if you look at those, we don't have a clear timeline on when the community processes will finish, but these are estimations of where we think some of these will end up. And the most important one for the new gTLD program is the new gTLD subsequent procedures PDP that Avri will cover shortly. Moving on to the next slide. On the Trademark Clearinghouse independent review, this was a GAC recommended review. We actually hired the analysis group to do the study, and they've published their initial report, and we took public comment, and in response to public comment, they are now collecting data on abandonment rates from registrars and wholesale pricing from registries. I don't know how much they'll be able to get, and then they'll finalize the report and post it hopefully in January. So for public comment. So this is almost in the tail end of the review, and we look forward to closing this one shortly. The next review is the route stability study that was actually committed to before the round started, and we are also almost done with this. We expect to have a draft report open for public, we have the report open for public comment until 22 December, and the public comment report will be published on 16 January, and the final revised report in April 2017. So also we're very close to finalizing this review. I think that the key finding is that the route is stable, and the new gTLD in general did not create any issues for the route. So, which is very important for us. So, hopefully we'll close this very soon. This is the next slide. This is a list of all of the published data that either on reviews or ongoing work that is going on. All of it is can be found on the ICANN website. It's all available for you to look into. A lot of material, but if you're looking for specific issues, hopefully this will give you all the answers that you need if we don't cover it here today. The next slide is about the policy development activities, and as I mentioned, the most important one for us is the new gTLD subsequent procedure. I'm not going to talk about it too much because Avri is going to cover that. We have a lot of different things, tracks that they are reviewing that are very important for moving the program forward. So with that, I will just summarize that the way it looks like now is that the reviews and the PDPs are not going to be done before the 2017-2018 timeframe. And so we look forward for a lot of this work to be done. The board has already issued a resolution that they will look forward for the reviews before they will assess where the next round or the next subsequent procedure will open. We look forward to all this work being done, and then hopefully we'll get from the community some advice on the next round as well, and we'll go from there. So with that, I'll close my presentation, and I give it to Zach to talk about the CCT reviews. Thank you.
Thanks, Akram. I'd like to ask a quick question. How many people in the room do not follow ICANN regularly? Okay.
Irregular.
Yeah. That's the chairman of the board, Steve Crocker, who doesn't follow because he leads. I guess that's probably the. Exactly. So, and I'm also curious, how many of you knew that there were 1,200 new top-level domains that were added in the past year? Yeah.
Is that none?
And how many of you in the last couple of days received a business card that had one of the new domains on it?
Good question.
All right, one, good. Two, all right, excellent. It seems appropriate while here in Mexico to talk about a fairly recent trade agreement between the United States and Mexico called NAFTA, because before it was enacted, there were a lot of people that thought that it was going to be the most incredible trade agreement ever signed, and a lot of people that thought it was going to be the end of the world. And now that it's been in place for a number of years, there's a lot of people that think that it's the best trade agreement that was ever signed, and a lot of people that think it was the worst trade agreement ever put in place. And like the new gTLD program, if you actually look at the data about NAFTA, the results are far less dramatic. Right? Some good, some bad, et cetera, but it wasn't dramatically one way or the other. And we faced some of that same kind of discussion around this new gTLD program. There were those that believed that it was going to be incredible, those that thought it was going to be a disaster, and pretty much those same people think it's been incredible or that it's been a disaster. And what we've tried to do in this review that was mandated as part of the affirmation of commitments, which is an agreement that ICANN signed with the United States government, in 2009, we wanted to try and look at this from a real data-based perspective, which is a relatively new way of looking at things inside of ICANN, right? And so in order to create a more realistic painting and a less impressionistic painting of the situation with the new gTLDs. And so there are some very interesting findings for the group, but it's still relatively new. As Akram shared with you, they're not even completely finished delegating the new strings. So this year that was sort of the year we focused on studying to look at whether or not there had been an increase in competition, whether it had been enhanced consumer trust, and whether there had been enhanced consumer choice, that year has been a year of growth and just the launch of the program. And so it's reasonable to assume that it will take longer to really see what the effects of the program are. And in fact, if you look at previous releases of new top-level domains, you haven't really seen what they've contributed in, until about 3 years. right? And so you've got more of a sense with a little bit more time has passed. But that said, there's been some interesting things that I think are worth noting. So when we look at competition, number of things we're looking at, for example, is new sales, market share, concentration. These are some of the statistics that we're trying to compile about the new gTLDs. And if we look at the new sales, in other words, the sales of second-level domains, the part to the left of the period, that have been made in the past couple of years, it's about split evenly between the legacy gTLDs and the new gTLDs. So that's a fairly significant proportion of these new sales. And if you include ccTLDs, it splits pretty evenly, a third, a third, and a third. So obviously these new TLDs have taken their place as the market has grown, but we're looking at 25 years of sales versus 1 year, and so you're not going to see a huge market share change. But we did see new gTLDs take about 9% of the market in this period of time. So that's a fairly significant, I think, dent, if you will, in the marketplace as well. But again, as we say, things are fairly new. When we talk about choice, we're often talking about non-price-based competition, right? I mean, have I got more choices? If the word wasn't available in a legacy TLD, do I now have that word available in a new TLD? And of course, that answer in most instances is yes, but one of the most interesting statistics is that a very large number, something like 70% of the new gTLDs that have been sold were available as concatenated strings in .com. So my own personal example, I bought something called bigshots.photography. And I bought it at a time when bitshotsphotography.com was in fact available in .com. So it's an interesting phenomena that folks are interested in this kind of semantic web and see value in these new TLDs. And in fact, we conducted a survey by Nielsen where we asked people some of the things that they liked and didn't like, where their awareness was of these new gTLDs. And there was a finding that there was an interest and a preference in this kind of semantic web and being able to tell from the suffix what kind of service or product that they'd be getting to, what type of website they'd be getting to. Now, the risk associated with that is that the survey also revealed that people were also interested in seeing some enforcement of those semantics. So, in other words, you have something new like .bank where there's a very strict kind of enforcement taking place that only real banks get to get a .bank, but .doctor is not the same. And so it'll be very interesting to see over time as we track consumer perception of the new gTLD program, what that'll look like into the future. So, a little bit of data, a little bit of impressionistic information from consumers, I think, tells a story that things are headed generally in the right direction in terms of competition. We also looked at trust and safeguards, and for the most part, the survey revealed that there hasn't been any degradation in trust. And for the most part, the program seems to be doing things designed to enhance trust. In other words, there are things that are being done to enhance trustworthiness of the DNS, and so that's generally a positive as well. And we're looking at the safeguards. It's difficult to look specifically at the success of individual safeguards, but we were able to look at whether or not they were implemented and whether they appear to be enforceable, and both of those things seem to be the case as well. One of the downside consequences that has been predicted and concerns intellectual property holders. I'm a member of the intellectual property constituency inside of ICANN, and there was a concern that this rapid expansion of the new gTLDs would lead to very high costs for trademark owners trying to essentially play a game of grabbing onto each of these new domains as they came out so that people wouldn't cyber squat on them, for example. And there's certainly been some of that, but there's certainly a much lower level of defensive registration than there has been historically in the legacy domains. Now, there's also a new way to protect yourself called blocking, and there's some new procedures for getting the domain back or getting it suspended that to rather create kind of a basket of protections. But even those have not been used in greater degree than they have been in the legacy TLDs. So again, the the issues there's still some issues to be addressed, but on the whole, the program seems to be headed in the right direction. And so that's sort of the issue about some of the downside consequences, but there's more work to be done. And in addition, how am I doing on time? I'm done. Okay. So, if I've sparked your curiosity, we will be releasing an interim report. It's not complete because there's still some data outstanding, but we're releasing an interim report on the 23rd of December for public comment. And so I really encourage all of you to take a look and read through it, gain an understanding of the questions we're asking, add questions that you think we ought to be asking, or interpretations you think that we're handling incorrectly. We'd love to hear from the entire Internet community in terms of their impressions of the report and of the new gTLD program. So thank you for your time.
Jonathan, just one question. Your review is one of the most highly visible, and there's quite a bit of expectation, and I think it's important to manage this expectation. What you're not going to come up with, I suspect, are conclusions. You're going to come up with trends, direction, but no firm conclusion. Or are you coming up with conclusions and recommendations?
So good question. Thanks, Shireen. There will be some conclusions and recommendations, but as far as some of these larger topics around competition, there probably won't be substantive recommendations around how to increase competition, for example. That said, one of the findings of the group is that, which is not new, is that it's very difficult to get the data necessary to really do competitive analysis. And if you look at any of the studies that have happened in the last 10 years, they all sort of conclude that more data would be better. And so I think we're reaching a similar conclusion. And so a large part of our recommendation is actually going to be about ICANN taking the notion of data collection and provision more seriously, so that as reviews move forward, some of these calculations we're performing around market concentration and market shares, et cetera, can be done on a regular basis so that they can be tracked in a comprehensive way. And so that'll be a very large and I think a complex recommendation, but not specific to this little recommendation will improve competition, for example.
Thank you. So Akram gave us an overview of the various reviews, what's happening on the PDP. Jonathan gave us a flavor of one of those reviews. I will move very shortly to Avery to talk about the PDP, but before that, sandwich in between the two, I'm going to ask Olivier a couple of minutes to talk about the Marketplace Health Index and why is it important for us to listen and understand what's going on there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shireen. And I'm just going to ask if Nigel can go over to the quick document which was up for public comment a few months ago, I believe. The gTLD Marketplace Health Index is another project at ICANN that is going to continue with tracking the gTLDs as they evolve in time to find out if they've actually fulfilled the original scenarios that we were wishing for them. There's no use in having new gTLDs for them not to be used, for competition to not thrive, for all of the original ideas of the program to not be fulfilled. Unfortunately, the screen is behind me, so it's going to be really hard for me to look at both things at the same time. And okay, and I can't see that, so Nigel's having a bit of a problem. So effectively, there was a first document that was up for public comment a couple of months ago that is just a beta document, a sort of example of what kind of metrics are going to be implemented to ensure ongoing tracking of the program, metrics that might be used also for the next round, if there is one, and metrics that are looking at robust competition, marketplace stability, and trust. And we might actually add more things to that. Do we have the document or not? Because I can tell you very
Your time
briefly
is running out.
My time is running out. I'm going to blame the Brits for that. Oh, darn, I do live in London, so okay. So effectively, well, looking at robust competition, diversity across the choice of service provider, geography, it's over there, okay. So if we can just scroll down to robust competition, one of the metrics, for example, is geographic diversity, to find out the percentage of distinct ICANN accredited generic top-level domain registrars by ICANN region. Are we on that page? Yeah. And so we've got these nice little graphics that are there, so that's one of the things. And they will be displayed like this in simple graphics so that they're easily seen and you can see the trends and so on. And here, so you can see all of the diversity across the world. And obviously there, it's quite obvious that in Africa there's very few, but you'll see other regions are quite well served apart from Latin America and Caribbean. And these are metrics that will enable us to actually see where we have to do some work and what improvements need to be made. If we go to the next page, you've got percentage of distant ICANN accredited gTLD registry operators by ICANN region. The page after that is to do with competition because, okay, geographic diversity is one thing, competition between the different domain names is another thing. Looking at the percentage of gTLD registrars that are distinct entities, looking at the number of registrar accreditations. And for those of you that are not aware, I think there are 3 people in the room that are not aware the difference between the registry, the people that run the actual domain. The registrars are the people that sell the domain names over to the public. So more registrar accreditations means that you will have more choice for the consumer. Going down to the next page, you can look at the total number of gTLDs, and you can see a rise in these, of course, a steady rise in these. Total second-level domain name registrations in gTLDs, year-on-year growth rates. It was going down, it's going back up. The next page, gTLD additions and deletions. Of course, we're now rolling out a lot of new gTLDs, but some might be rolled back. We don't know. It depends really of how the market will work. And really what we're doing here is to track the market and see if things are progressing in one way or another. At this point, of course, this is the first report. These are just examples. It's very difficult to spot any trend, but we'll do that. And I see Shireen is about to cut my microphone off. If we could go down to marketplace stability. It's probably a bit too far down. Looking at the newly accredited gTLD registrars, that's also important. And finally, trust. Trust in the DNS is really important. Trust in generic top-level domains is important. And so there's also some metrics on this, including the accuracy of WHOIS records. I'm not going to go through the whole document. It's online. It's possible. I think we'll probably sort of have it linked to the agenda. But this is ongoing work, and we have a working group that's working on this. We are going to add more metrics. And if you do have some feedback to provide to us, there's an email address that you can contact, and we'll be very welcome to receive feedback. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. Avery, to talk to us about the PDP background and status. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Yes, it's a picture from one of the walls here. I really liked it, and I really liked the succession of things going by as we sort of toot on our horns. But anyway, so the starting point for this, next slide, please. Yeah, the starting point is we do have a policy. The slide will show up sooner or later. Oh, okay. We have a policy from 2007. We have an application guidebook from 2012. And of course, you all know this already. I'd kind of written thinking I would be talking to a room of people that perhaps didn't know this already. We are undergoing multiple reviews on both policy and the process. We can change anything that needs to be changed and that we have consensus on changing. But if we don't change anything, then we'll stick with the same policy, and perhaps the application process will change. That would be in GDD's hands, although there would probably be an implementation review team. So things would change, but they wouldn't change all that much. Next slide, please. So, and then the next again. So the current status is we already did one community, and that was the slide before. We already did a community comment on some overarching issues. One of them was we asked, do we need any more gTLDs in the future at all? Is the new 1,000 enough and we can just stop there? Do we need to categorize or differentiate types? Last time we essentially had 2 + 1 types. We had the standard, we had the community, and then we eventually ended up having what were the geographical, although that hadn't been the intention at the time of the policy. We're asking ourselves, should this be done in rounds, or do we want to go for some others? A lot of people that don't want to ever end up with one of these hiatuses again and want something continuous. Can we do a first come, first serve process as a question be asked? How do we balance predictability and flexibility? The first principle of the last round was It shall be predictable. There shall be no surprises. Now we found out that flexibility requires surprises. So, or at least caused surprises when there were issues to be dealt with that hadn't been thought of before. So how do we balance those? How do we improve community engagement during the process? And should we limit the number of applications? So that went out in community comment. We got back comments. We're now processing our recommendations on that. Some of the trends look like, yeah, we're going to want more gTLDs. Yeah, we're going to want to do some differentiation in types. We don't know what. And I'll talk a little bit more about the rounds. Now we're basically working on 4 tracks going forward. So next one. Okay, that's okay. Then there's a quick timeline that basically shows what was being spoken of before, where we're eventually going to send out a community comment too, based upon the tracks that we're talking about now, and our preliminary completion. We're still aiming for a final report by July 18th, at then which point it goes in the next steps of board approval, implementation process, et cetera. That I'm not predicting because that's beyond the PDP, but the PDP is currently scheduled for July 18. Next, and then next after that. So we have 4 work tracks. It's amazing how it always wants to go back first. It's kind of like the new gTLD process. Every time you think you're going to take a step forward, you find out you've taken one back. Yes, so we have 1 track, which is the overall process, application support, and outreach. And looking at things like the community support program we had that, you know, did it work, did it not, for developing economies. Looking at all the legal and regulatory issues, and I will give examples of these in each. String contention, we had a lot of discussion. Now, obviously, if we're first come, first serve, we won't have much string contention, but we probably won't be first come, first serve. Objections and dispute resolution, and then 1 track that's looking at internationalized domain names, technical issues, and operations. So some of the, as Akram mentioned, we have 30 questions plus that we're going through, so I'm certainly not covering them. But here we're looking at, was the process clear? Were the fees appropriate? Should it really be the same fee for every kind of application? What went wrong with the applicant support program? We know it went wrong. What went wrong? Why did it go wrong? And what do we do? How are we going to support developing economies? Can we do that? Did comment periods work properly? So those are the kinds of questions that we're dealing with. Next one, please, WT2, is that's looking at reserved names. What sorts? How many? In the first round, we sort of said we're keeping the set minimal, and if people don't like it, they can file an objection. Then the board sort of decided, no, we need lists of names, so they created some names. So now we're looking at their lists, your lists, other lists, and, you know, how big a list can we have of names that are reserved? Do we need extra registrant protections? Are second-level rights protections sufficient? Do we need more than we've done in the past? Is a single registry agreement, now we have a single registry agreement, sufficient? Or do we need a bunch of different ones for different kinds? Do we need to consider allowing for different, if you're a different category, if you're a different type, if you're a brand versus a community, you have a different contract. So those are the issues there. Some of the W3 issues. Rounds, if we do rounds, is it like the 2012 round where we get 1,000? And there are people that are predicting that there's another 10,000 potential applicants waiting in the wings, especially if brands opens up. So if we're talking about 10,000 rounds, 10,000 in the next round, do we want to deal with that? Do you want to deal with that, Akram? Do we use a first-come, first-served process? A lot of interest in doing that, especially because it's ongoing. But again, if there's 10,000, if there's many, how do you do that? You lose name contention there. So we're really in the mode now of we're discussing various hybrid procedures, things like you have an open for 3 months, then you do the initial processing for 3 months, then you open for 3 months, and you've set it up in a predictable way. We're not saying, one of the things I don't expect we'll find is we don't continue a next round until we've had the reviews. This time, we knew that this was a learning round when we did the policy, and the notion was we got to learn, so we're going to have to review. Now we're taking a notion that, sure, there'll still be things to fix, but we'll be able to do ongoing policy changes as opposed to stopping. So this time, it really is the intention to have ongoing. We had an independent objector that was supposed to look at things that were perhaps objectable for people that couldn't afford to pay or couldn't do the process. Did that work? Did it work well? Did it work badly? Do we need one? And were the objection procedures, did they work properly? Do they need to? I'm almost done. Next one. The work for questions, how to handle questions of technical competence, how to handle questions of financial capability. That again comes into the, if you're one applicant applying for 20, do you have to be checked for competence all the time? Also, if there are different types, does every type of registry need the same kind of competence? Does every type need the same financial capability? IDNs, questions like single character IDNs, where it's actually a whole word in another script in another language. They're prohibited. Should they be? Should we prioritize IDN string applications, either by giving them a separate round or doing something else? How do we treat IDN variants? That topic is still ongoing and such. As I said, these are really just example questions. One of the questions that I didn't bring up here, and I think it's in WT3, but you reminded me of it, is communities. Some people think we really need to do much, much more to support communities. Some people think communities are rubbish and they're just a way to get around the system. And I mean, I'm being neutral now and gave the extremes of both of those views. And that's the kind of discussion we're having there. So that, next one, please. So getting involved. You can join the working group. You could join one of the specific sub-teams. Anyone can sign up as an observer where you get all the mail, and there's a lot of it. But you can't answer it, you just get to read it. But you can always say, ooh, that was important, I want to argue, please make me a participant instead of an observer, and you change. All the email lists are open, archive, all calls are recorded. So, you could check out what's being done at your own leisure. You can't get to sleep at night, or, you wake up at 3 in the morning and, oh my word, what's happening with new gTLDs? And you can, and then also we do put out formal comment solicitations. So if minimally you want to just make sure that the wrong thing didn't happen. One, there are ways to participate to try and make something happen. There are ways to monitor to make sure that you know when something bad is happening. And there are ways to check and say, oh, I want to check and see if nothing bad happened, nothing to comment on. So, that. And then the last one was, those are the resources. Those will be there. So there's the project page, there's the wiki page, there's the charter. And hopefully I didn't go too long, but.
Thank you, Avery. So we've heard from the reviews, we've heard from the PDP. We now have just a series of comments that will take somewhere around 8 to 10 minutes, and then I'll open it up for questions and answers. The first set of comments, and I'd ask the speakers, please don't spend more than 2 minutes, is some of the stakeholders to give us their view from their stakeholder point about these reviews, about the PDP. So can I start with Olivier, then Megan, then Olga. Olivier, 2 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Shireen. And since
and state which stakeholder you're...
Yeah, well, first I'll say that I took more time than I was going to take before, so I'll take less time this time, hopefully. So I'm with the at-large community, as I said, the European at-large organization. We bring the input from end users into the ICANN processes, and the at-large advisory committee is one of these committees that can basically comment on everything and anything that takes place at ICANN, including the new gTLD process. We have a very varied community, people from all around the world with very various views, and some people are really happy about the new gTLD program, some people are not happy about the new gTLD program. On the negative side, there's a potential, of course, for end-user confusion, malicious use of domain names, spam phishing, etc. These are concerns that many people in our community have. On the positives, of course, there's more choice for registering a domain name. There was a time you would just look at the probably like .com and find out that 9 times out of 10 the name you were going for was absolutely full, or somebody was trying to resell it to you at an extortionate price. This appears to have eased now because there's so much more choice in gTLDs. There are concerns about the lack of geographic diversity when it comes to registrars. As you've seen from the metrics that I've shown earlier, there's certainly an imbalance on that, and so thinking, well, maybe we need another round to be able to address this. And as Avri has actually said, also concerns about the poor number of community generic top-level domain applications. So that's another one of those things. So we're very eager to learn the results of the review team. We're very active in that. We have people that are on the review team itself. We've also got people that are actively involved in the policy development process for the subsequent procedures. And we actually invite more end users to be involved in that because it's really important. I mean, at the end of the day, the internet is for you guys, and this whole program is for the end users. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivier. Megan?
Thanks. I'm Megan Richards. I'm from the Government Advisory Committee, and that's what I'm here to talk to you about today. And I'm also a member of the CCT review team. I think there are a couple of things I'd like to say. First of all is that the affirmation of commitments, which was the basis for this review, has been integrated now into the bylaws of ICANN under the new principles and under the new accountability framework. So this is an important thing, and it shows that this is not just something that's one-off. It will continue in the future, and it's integrated into the structure and functioning of ICANN, which is, of course, important. I'm not going to repeat, of course, what Jonathan said, which was very clear, but one aspect which I think is important, in particular for GAC, along with the many other things, was the effectiveness of the application and evaluation procedure, which is one of the things we were supposed to look at. And as Jonathan said, the information is not sufficiently robust, it's very limited. However, there are still data and there's still information that gives us some ideas of what's going on. First of all, with respect to GAC early warning advice, it's clear that this was very useful in many cases to make sure that public policy issues were addressed before strings were delegated. It allowed 2 applicants to have 80% of their application fee returned for public policy reasons, and so this was one thing that we have seen has been very useful. The issue of how accessibility and use was available for the whole world is clearly problematic, and we have Andy Mack's report, which Jonathan has mentioned and Olivier has mentioned. This is, again, so this is something that really has to be addressed in the future. If there's interest and if these are areas where we think and where new gTLDs are demanded, that's clearly another issue. Do we increase supply or increase demand? And then the other thing I want to mention briefly here is someone mentioned the number of community applications. I think the issue that we were particularly concerned about was the success rate of community applications. You've seen that of the 1,900 applications, 1,229 are already contracted. That's a very good success rate. There were a lot of contentions and complications, but of the 51 community applications, 75% were rejected. So there's certainly something that's a bit unusual there, and we had a report of the Ombudsman, and this is again something that, of course, needs a lot more looking at. So in order to limit the time, as I said, more information is needed, the database is limited, we clearly have to do more in this respect for future reviews, and the whole system and the whole delegation process is still new. I mean, we still have new gTLDs that are being delegated. So we're looking at a moving target, which makes it rather complex. So we are confident in what we've done so far, but it's clear that a lot more needs to be done to have a really fully robust and complete review. Thanks.
Thank you, Megan. Olga, another stakeholder view.
Thank you, Akram. My view will be focused on So my views is as a chair of the GAC Working Group on Protection of Geographic Names. Is an internal GAC group, was established in 2012 after the Durban meeting, ICANN Durban meeting. what's the purpose of our work? Is lower uncertainty for applicants, prevent and avoid misuse of names which are relevant for communities, regions, countries, and lower conflicts once the new gTLD next round is ongoing. So we produced some documents that were open for public comments. They were not GAC consensus documents, they were just background documents. We wanted to gather feedback from the community. It was the first time that GAC did that, but it was very successful. We presented the outcomes in the Singapore meeting. And after doing some work with these comments and these draft documents, we are now focused on developing a set of best practices for new gTLD rounds, for ICANN, for the applicants, and for the government. So the aim of this best practice is to help concile interest for applicants and having legal certainty and clear environment versus the interest of governments and public authorities and communities. Now we are facing this challenge of how to inject and bring these ideas that are important for at least some governments into this new gTLD PDP process. So we are challenging our time with that. We appreciate very much the openness of the GNSO in this process, but it's challenging because we have also many other working groups and lists and places that we have to also pay attention to. So I know some colleagues from GAC are participating. I will try to get involved personally more. Also, there have been very important efforts between GAC and GNSO to work together to avoid then, once the whole process is finished, then we have the conflicts. We are trying to work together. It's not easy. The GAC, as you know, work by consensus, so it takes time. We are 170 plus countries working together with different interests and different views of the same thing. So that's my view. Perhaps other colleagues from the GAC can add other comments once we have the time. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And now the last three topics. They are topics of interest. We're going to talk about IDNs. Renalia will give us a couple of minutes view on what's happening on the IDN side. The two letters CC codes. Akram will talk about that, and then the geographical imbalance, which I'm going to go back to Avery on this issue. So Renalia on.
Thank you, Shireen. Let's look at how the new gTLD program has served a global community that is multilingual. IDNs, or internationalized domain names, and for people who don't know what that is, they're essentially domain names that are represented by letters and characters from different scripts and writing systems. So IDNs are meant to serve the online needs of a world that is diverse in language and script. The new gTLD program received 116 IDN generic top-level domain applications. That's only 6% of total applications. And these applications were for IDNs in 9 languages and scripts. So against that, let's consider our global context, where there are about 7,000 languages spoken in the world. In terms of the world population of 7.4 billion, almost 93% can only communicate in a language that is not English. 46% of people in the world that are connected to the internet today, and this is the famous 3.4 billion that everyone refers to at the IGF, they comprise most of the English-speaking population. The bulk of the unconnected or yet to be connected, 54% of the world population, are those that need support for their languages and scripts. And they require IDNs to access the internet effectively. Now, the demand for IDNs, current and future, in my view, should be higher if they really serve a global community that is diverse in languages and script. In terms of adoption, IDNs only comprise 2% of the world's domains. And the World Report on Internationalized Domain Names in 2015 highlight 2 primary challenges of adoption: the non-universal acceptance of IDNs in internet-enabled applications, devices, and systems, and the lack of user awareness. In moving forward with the new gTLD program, I personally believe that IDNs should be a priority. So that's an answer to the question that Avery posed in her PDP work track. Concurrently, the problem of non-universal acceptance and lack of user awareness need to be addressed. And the challenge is figuring out whose problem is it. And like IPv6 adoption around the world, it's a shared responsibility. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So just to give a rounded view in terms of status of IDNs in the root zone right now, the total is 139 delegated. 82 of these are IDN generic top-level domains, 57 are IDN's country code top-level domains. And where we stand, that covers 21 scripts, 35 languages, but more needs to be done. Thank you.
Thank you, Renalia. The message was very clear. IDNs was a priority for the next round.
And yeah, I'll pass that on, but we'll you know.
All right, Akram, 2 minutes on the two-letter CCs, and then the geographical imbalance after that, and then we'll open for.
So the two-letter CC is a hot topic. There are some GAC members that have provided their unsatisfaction with the release of their country code names at the second level in the new gTLD program. Although there is no GAC consensus advice on this issue, we've been working with this two-character release for a long time. It's important to note that in 2007, the GNSO Reserved Names Working Group did a policy on the two-character release. And that policy was integrated in the registry agreement. And there are two paths for the registry to release the two-character codes. One path is by discussing it with the government and getting approval from the government and the CCTLD registry. The other one is that the registry will put measures to avoid confusion, and then ICANN will approve the release. So the board has asked the staff to put a framework together to do that, and the two characters that were not letter were released a while back. The letter codes were released in 3 phases. The first phase was we asked the registries to request the release, and then we looked at comments from the government about confusability to see what we can do what the registry needs to do to avoid the confusability and put measures in place to avoid the confusability. So for the codes that did not receive any comments, we released those. Then the second phase was to actually make sure that the comments are only about confusability, because that's what the policy says. And we moved forward with everything that, we released everything that did not receive comments on confusability. Then we worked with the community to come up with a framework to put measures to mitigate the confusability. And now we're about ready to release the rest of the codes based on the registry implementing these measures to avoid confusability. It's important to also note that all the legacy TLDs do have the two-character codes released. So it's not something new that we're doing in the new gTLD program. It is consistent with the legacy TLDs as well. It's important to note that a lot of the CC TLDs themselves actually allow the two-character codes to be released as well. So this is not new in the domain name system that we release the two-character codes. And we're doing it in a step-by-step with consultation with the GAC and with the countries that are having concerns about that. And we're hoping that actually the mitigations will meet the requirements of the governments as we move forward. So I think that the process has been followed all the policies that are available, followed all the advice that are available, and we are actually moving it in orderly fashion. And I think that it's about time to move forward with this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Akram. So we've reached the end of the various presentation. A lot of food for thought. Well, Avery has generously given her slot away so that we put it to questions. And if a question comes on geographical, I'll point you. So I open the floor now for questions. Please state your name and your affiliation and your question then. Thank you. As I said, there is no translation, so the questions unfortunately have to be in only one language, as English. And a remote participant will submit their questions in writing and would appear on the screen above. I'd like to ask the first question.
Well, my name is Jameson Olufuye. I'm the chair for the business constituency, chair for finance and operation of the business constituency, and also the chair for Africa ICT Alliance, based in Abuja. So let me first talk with respect to the BC. Actually, it's a general belief in BC that before we proceed to the new gTLD round, that is very important that it should be exhaustive review of all the studies that's ongoing, and that's what we're doing. And then, because they're also concerned about the issue of compliance and abuse with regard to the existing delegated new gTLDs. Well, that is about BC. Then on FICTA from my region, based on the studies that have come out, be done by RT and Andrew Mark, it's very obvious that the maturity level concerning the domain industry in Africa is quite low. And that is clear with the number of delegation or application received. So going forward, I think we need to do a lot concerning help to build the maturity of the industry in Africa in particular. And one of the things I have is that we may need to look at the markets. It is important to look at the big markets. For example, Nigeria is a big market, we'd say the #1 economy, and it could be necessary to organize some ICANN meetings, find a way to organize some ICANN meetings in Nigeria, because the resources are there, but the awareness is very low. So the question then is, what other things can we do for developing countries generally to encourage them to participate in the next round when it comes up? Thank you.
Who would like to respond to this question? What can we do for developing countries to help them participate more in the next round? Is it something the GNSO is looking at in terms of the PDP policies? Jonathan? Okay, does Jonathan and Olga want to respond? Jonathan?
Yes, thanks for your question. It's a widely expressed and discussed question inside of the ICANN community, which is how to better serve the Global South and in general, and Africa in particular. I think one of the interesting aspects of the study that was conducted by AM Global was that people that might otherwise have thought of participating in the previous round were unclear as to what the real business model might be to succeed with a new string. And I think that that's telling, and I think that what we need to do is really explore, as you say, working on the maturity of the industry generally in Africa. And I'm not sure that the next step is to try and get registries or new strings there, because the strings that exist, the registries that exist, have low subscription rates, participation rates by registrants. And so I feel like it would almost be doing a disservice to someone to convince them that they ought to go into business with a new string unless there really was a viable business model waiting for them. And so we need to, I think, look more carefully at how to encourage better participation among registrants first, people creating their own websites, making use of IDNs where appropriate, building local content, for example, like we heard yesterday about the web series from Ghana that's gone viral around the world. So I think that there's opportunities there, but I think that demand has got to be driven by the people that want the second level domains, more so than trying to find the poor person we convinced to go after a top level domain only to find that the market isn't ready to purchase it.
Okay, I've got 3 members of the panel who also want to respond. So we want to allow more time for questions, but why don't I give you just a minute each and just give a quick question. So Olga, Avery, and then Olivier, and then I have 2 more questions. I can see people raise their hands.
Thank you, Atram. Having tried to explain the new gTLD, Shirin, sorry, having tried to explain the concept of new gTLDs in Latin America for kind of 2 or 3 years, I can tell you that it's the purpose of it, one of the biggest barriers. Why should I? What is the purpose? Which is the business model? What is of my interest? Now we have good stories to tell or some examples to show. And then it's the price and the complexity. But first is, what is it for? So that's the point.
Avri speaking. Yeah, a part of what we're looking at is indeed why did we fail at that in terms of having that wider distribution. Now, a lot of it also comes down to, yes, are they prepared for it in terms of registry service providers and registries? The other was the expense. It's one of the reasons for the financial issue. When an expense is listed in U.S. kind of economy, where, yes, 186,000 may not seem a lot to a corporation in Africa, et cetera, that becomes an exorbitant sum. So that whole notion, that's why the GAC had actually recommended last time that for developing economies there be a free application, which never came about. So we are looking at those things, and it is complex, and I think there's also a certain chicken and egg of, if we don't have a local registry that's selling to us, well, why should I send money for registries in a colonial power place? And people do say things like that. So there really is a chicken and egg problem on why should I register and give you money if I can't register locally and give us money.
Thank you, Avri. Olivier, 1 minute, please.
Thank you, Akram. Shireen, sorry.
When Fadi was the CEO, they used to confuse me with him. Now he's gone, they confuse me with Akram. Thank you.
That was a joke, by the way. Sorry.
Is Yoram here? They never confuse me with Yoram, that's for sure.
Okay, I'm not going I'm going to just add to what Jonathan and Avri have said. Actually, we in the at-large community, there's been a lot of discussion on this, of course. One of the things is, do we need to have a local registrar that can sell domain names locally? You're talking about the internet, so why not just buy domain names from the US directly with your credit card? But in the global south, there are less credit cards than in other parts of the world. And so you need perhaps local payment methods, other ways to be able to reach the consumer. And I'm using that word, the consumer, because they're going to buy a domain name locally to serve the local markets. That's all.
Thank you. The next question is down this end.
Yes.
And then this gentleman, and then...
Okay,
Please state your name.
From the Patrick Pennings from the Council of Europe Information Society Department. I already spoke briefly about the applicants' community-based applications, and why we did the report basically was because there was such a low positive reply rate or acceptance rate, and that puzzled us, and that's from a human rights perspective, and that's why we also wanted to share this with the communities and ensure that there is a proper reflection on these community-based applications. Second, I have actually 3 points. One is this reflection. The second is the question of the semantic domain names. I think there is an increasing link there with content, and I wonder to which extent there is for us, there may be a human rights angle to that. So I don't know if that has been considered when we are speaking about semantic domain names, basically. And a third, but that's maybe not directly for here, is a whole question of the reserved domain names with regards to international organizations. That is a concern for quite a number of international organizations, that not to be confused with other existing domain names. Thank you.
Thank you. Who would like to comment on the content and the semantics and the human rights issue? Is anyone working on WS2, on the issue of human rights around that would like to? No one? Okay.
I'm one of the people that's working. My name is Andrew Mack, AIM Global. I am one of the people working on the human rights subgroup, although I don't claim to speak on behalf of it. I can tell you a tiny bit about where we are right now. One of the things that we're trying to do is to understand what norms are out there already how they might be applicable in an ICANN context, how this can inform the ICANN community, and what is the best way to use them that doesn't take us outside of mission and also doesn't constrain us beyond applicable law and things along those lines. So we've just come to a good point where there are some findings that are coming forward, and those should be I think pushed forward fairly soon. Your participant, no? Avri is, I think, as well. So those are just now being shared with the community for comment. And we've had a group, it's a pretty active group, regularly 15 or 20 people on the calls, and some very good dialogue around that with the desire to make sure that human rights are taken into account. I just wanted to add one thing to the earlier conversation real quickly, since we did the research that Jonathan mentioned, and that is the other point, which is amongst the people who were considering applying in the Global South, there was a strong feeling that there still wasn't enough known just generally that there was the possibility of getting a something new. And so one of the questions that what we may have as a community is, to what extent, how are we going to get the word out there? If this is in fact something we want to continue with, how are we going to get the word out there? What's the best way to do that? Whose responsibility is it? When we're talking with different interviewees from the Global South, many of them said, I get the idea, it's not necessarily a question of cost, but the cost of not only getting the string, but also explaining to the market that that's a possibility, that was perceived as very substantial. So, thank you.
Thank you. The second question was about reserve name and international organization. I suppose you're referring to IGOs and Chris, I wonder, you've been shepherding and leading the discussion. If you can give an update on the IGOs and NGOs where we are. So, thank you.
Certainly, Shireen. Thanks very much. Hi, everyone. Chris Despain, ICANN board member. Following the discussions in Hyderabad, we have now started a process of having the parties, the relevant parties, being brought together effectively with a sort of independent facilitator to try and bring everybody to the table and see if we can find a way through with the IGO acronyms. It's really only the IGO acronyms plus some Red Cross acronyms that are proving to be problematic. So we're hoping that, and Joran actually knows probably the more detail than I do, but I think a meeting's being arranged very soon. Is Joran still here? No. No, okay. There is a meeting being arranged very soon. Bruce Tonkin, who was on the board until the AGM, and obviously well known to everybody, has agreed to act as a facilitator and bring everybody together as soon as possible to see if we can find a way through. Thanks.
Thank you. So the next question is from, sorry, Akram, one more thing.
Yeah, it's important to note that all of the IGO acronyms are currently reserved until there is a policy, so or an agreement on how to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, so I've got 3 questions from the floor. Did you want to comment on the IGOs, or you have a questions? Okay. A comment. All right, I'll come to your, okay, I'll come to you. So would you like a question, please?
Thank you, Jonathan. This is Jorge Cancio. I'm with the Swiss government. I happen also to be the representative for Switzerland in the Governmental Advisory Committee to ICANN. And just now I was having this déjà vu feeling, and I was wondering whether we were in Hyderabad still 1 month ago, or whether we are really in Guadalajara, because the level of discussion to a certain extent, I don't know how all the people here in the room feel, was very, very ICANN-esque. We were very much into the details of our acronyms, of our procedures, and I wonder whether this is really something that is easy to follow for people who are not into that, into our meetings, into our work streams, because it's such a challenge to be there. And that's only to point out that we always we, and I mean the people who are participating in ICANN, and we should be aware of this informational gap with the people outside. We shouldn't underestimate it, and we should take it into account if we really want to be inclusive of the wider community, the global community, if we really taking seriously the intention of involving everybody out there to serve the global public interest. And this is a general comment, and now would come the commercial. And in the comment is that we are trying from the Geneva Internet Platform, which is an initiative sponsored by my government, to give some information, some one-stop shop point to know about the different work streams and also about the new gTLD process. We have one website in the digital watch of the Geneva Internet Platform, where we try to put all the relevant information in an updated fashion so that people are really able to follow this without losing themselves in amongst the many thousands of trees in this very large forest of the gTLD expansion. Thank you.
What do you mean by gTLD? What do you mean by gTLD? You just used your own shorthand. Thank you. You made a very good point.
Akram made a joke.
There was going to be a question at the end of this, but there wasn't. Thank you. All right. Okay. Go ahead. There wasn't a question, it was an observation, but if you have a...
Yes, thanks, Shireen. No, it's Olivier speaking. It's just an observation with regards to the gTLD and the acronym soup that we use at ICANN. Go to your favorite search engine, do ICANN glossary, or you go for gTLD Marketplace Health Index, which is what I was talking about. There is a glossary in there as well. There are plenty of ways to find the acronyms. But I know it's terrible.
Okay, so we'll take the question from the remote participant and then come back to you. And okay, all right, we've got 12 minutes to go, so we really need to plow through quickly those questions and give answers to. So remote participant, please.
Okay, so this question is from Jan Henninot. It is regarding gTLDs. And he says that he wants to recall the frame of the situations regarding gTLDs. So he asks, what is the generated turnover of new gTLDs activity and in comparison with the overall turnover of ICANN? I don't know.
Akram?
This is Akram Atala. I would not actually try to provide a number on this, but our financials are on our website, and we actually report on all of these things, and you can find it in the presentations that are there. We do a quarterly update every quarter as well on the financials, so you can get the most recent numbers from there. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Please state your name and your affiliation. Thank you.
I'm Xiaodong Li, the CEO of Zenix. I'm very happy to see the new gTLD program is with the hard effort from the community and ICANN staff. But I just have two issues to mention. I think the first issue is in the first round for the new gTLD application, not too many applications from the developing countries. I can give you an example, for example, for China. So there is less than 5% application is from China compared to the 20% internet population and the big in the market. I think there's some kind of reason from the local community, but also I think maybe I can need more outreach for that if I can want to open a second round. So, and I think we need to try to avoid the massive effect in the future. Because now in the first round, there's so many very good experience was applied by some people or organizations from the developed countries. And the second, that I'm very happy that ICANN board member mentioned IDN a lot. And the IDN is very, very key issues, even that it was researched and developed for past, I think it's almost 17 years. But it's not very popular now. It's also have a lot of challenge for the IDN application because there is a lot of issues have not been solved yet. For example, the variant issues, and also the IDN will increase the phishing side in the future, how to protect the users. So I think now I can have some plan for USG. I think it's a good job, but now there is a lot of issues. I think it's just after a while in the workshop room 2, there is also a workshop for the unique culture ID in the future, which is based on the IDN and also the internationalized email address. So I think we need to work together to see what will happen if we work together to solve the problem, and to see what kind of problem we face in current stage. Yes, I think I can need more plan on that. It's a question and also a comment.
Okay. Renalia?
Just to decrypt the UASG reference that Xiaotong mentioned just now, that's the Universal Acceptance Steering Group, which is a community initiative that ICANN is also supporting. And it's trying to address the problem of this non-universal acceptance of IDNs and gTLDs that are longer than 3 letters.
I think on the first issue of only 5% of application came from China, and and that applies also to the first question. There was talk about Africa, and we need to do a much better outreach in the next subsequent round. And I think Avri has commented on that. Do you want to say something else? Okay, go ahead.
Briefly, I think last time there had been developed a very fine outreach program, but it never got agreed to. And time went by, and all of a sudden it was too late for an outreach program. So I think one of the important signals to this time is that we start one early, and we actually agree to do one and put the finances behind it, because that was one of the issues last time, was getting one agreed to, and then the one that was agreed to was considered to be too big by people, and it wasn't done. And but I had read that outreach plan. That would have been great if it had happened a year before we actually opened up applications.
Okay, I'm going to move to the next question from Benedicto, and then one more question, and then we will close the session after that. So, Benedicto?
Thank you. I think I can... Yeah. Sure. No, thank you. I want to touch on a point that was raised by Mr. Akram Tala, that refers to the use of two-letter country codes as second-level domain. And I want to be very careful in my comments because I did not benefit from being in Hyderabad and having a first-hand contact with the decision that was made by the board. But my understanding, and also in consultation with colleagues that were there, is that the decision was taken at a very late hour in the meeting. I think the board decision was announced on November 8th, one day before the end of the meeting. And there was not enough time for the GAC to digest and to elaborate on this. So what is in the GAC communique is a request for more explanation, more clarification, decision. I think that was maybe the possible outcome for the meeting, but I do not have a temperature of how many GAC members were dissatisfied with the decision. My country certainly is one of them that is not satisfied. I don't know if it is some or many or most members. Certainly would like to have some more clarity, and I thank you for explaining a bit of the history behind it. I think it's important for us. But in principle, we think the decision is in very flagrant contradiction with the approach that has been followed so far in regard to country-level codes. that I think the general approach is that they should be protected in some way. I think the decision deviates from this. With a very market-oriented approach, we don't see clearly how the public interest was addressed by doing this. We also would like to have some more information. We also think it is in contradiction with the responses that were given by many governments, including my own, in that regard. So we think this is, in principle, again, I want to be very careful, but we think it is a misguided decision that was made, and we are looking to ways in which we can address this and make sure that we have a common understanding. And we think this was, again, something that was done in the very last hour, as you have said, maybe based on a very broad understanding. We'd like to have more clarity on this, but in principle, we are dissatisfied and we look for a way to challenge the decision. Thank you.
Akram, do you want to respond, or you just leave the comment sitting, or?
Thank you, Benedicto, for your comments. We appreciate your concerns. I would be more than happy to go over and explain the steps that are being taken separately so that you have a better understanding of what we're doing. But I think that, as I mentioned, the contractual obligations that are in the contract, we have to abide by them, and we're following the step-by-step process that we put together. But I'll spend some time with you after this to go over this. Thank you.
Just one, maybe, if I can, last word. I think sometimes we are concerned about taking in the context of ICANN some things that may be seen as natural consequence of some bureaucratic way of dealing with things. And because we have bylaws that say this, or we have to do that. I think we have, in some cases, take a political approach. And I think here is clearly an issue that can lead to very serious confrontation in regard to very serious government and sovereign interests. And I would call for the decision, the discussion, the conversation on this issue to be taken very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you. And for the last question, yes, the lady, yeah, the last question. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm new here, so my question, I'm not so sure if it's going to be the place to ask it, but I work in an association that we are an NGO, and we represent an international association of internet hotlines where the public can report child sexual abuse material found on the internet. And I was wondering, like many of the places on the internet, when people actually upload and provide and have this type of material, which is illegal and which is made available, these are registers, I assume, I mean, in many cases. So I was wondering, what are the registrars doing actually to ensure that these domain names are not abused? And what are the policies in place? And then if you move on and you have more registers and in more places around the world, I assume that it's going to be difficult maybe to keep a level of accreditation so that actually the new registrars can actually follow up policy. So I'm sorry if it's not the place or the moment to ask the question, but I would appreciate if maybe you could point me towards someone with whom I could get more information about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Akram, quick comment?
This is Akram Atalla. Quickly, I think what you're talking about in I Can Speak would be the restaurant. The restaurant who registers the domain, they're the ones that put the content on the domain. ICANN actually does not have a contract with the restaurant. ICANN has a contract with the registry and the registrar. And then the restaurant has a contract with the registrar, where they can actually, the registrar can make decisions on how they want to deal with content, if they want to deal with content. But that's not an ICANN issue. It's not something that we have in our contract with the registrar. I hope that explains it.
Okay, it is not very much, I agree. Olivier, you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Shireen. It's Olivier speaking. Actually, in the contract that ICANN has with the contracted parties, so the registries and registrars, there is a section on public interest commitments. And so this is interpreted in different ways, and it has more or less, depending on what the contract is. Some registrars and registries take a very strong stance, some take a softer stance. But there certainly is, there are several processes regarding abuse of domain names. Of course, you've also got the other parallel track of law enforcement that also works directly with the industry. But there's work going on in that, and the view of people in our community is that there should be some improvements to this as well. So hopefully by the next round, if there is a next round again, then this should be probably easier to deal with.
We've reached the end of the session. I will indulge you for 1 or 2 more minutes, asking Nigel just to summarize the key points, and then we'll draw the session to a close. Nigel?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So I don't think we need a long summary. We'll publish something on the IGF site. As you know, all workshops have summaries published. We'll also publish some links on there, because I think this has been a very comprehensive presentation. We heard Akram talk about the overall review process and the reviews that have taken place, including the very important community and consumer trust review that Jonathan also spoke on. And we also, of course, heard from Avery on the policy development process. And I think this is very important for all people in the room, is that these processes are open. They're not just for registrars, they're not for registrants, they're for civil society, they're for users, they're for governments. So please get involved in these processes. Please give your views, so if there is a subsequent round, then your views can be taken into account. We had a good discussion on various issues, the issues of geographical representation, of diversification, of cost, of community names were raised, and these are all issues that are being looked at in this very comprehensive process that ICANN is undertaking. So please get involved. It doesn't cost anything. It only costs your time. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've had discussion on the 2-letter country code and the last discussion on registrants as well. So thank you, everyone, and I'll draw the meeting to a close. Many thanks. Thank you.